Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this cookery demonstration for Rosh Hashanah and Sukkot. In just over a week's time, we commence the Jewish festival season, starting with the High Holy Days, when in normal times, all Jews come together, whether they attend our synagogues 3 times a day or 3 times a year, and whatever form of Judaism they adhere to. There is one great unifier for them all: gastronomic Judaism, eating Jewish-type foods. Wherever they stand in the spectrum, they enjoy bagels, borscht, and blintzers, challah, chicken soup, cholent and chopped liver, and knedlich, kreplach, and kugel. So let's get going with our cookery demonstration by our Edgware United Synagogue presenters, in which we'll go through a complete Yom Tov meal. The first dish is apple and honey challah. I am most grateful to Cressida and the family for allowing us to show this video following Mark Polivnik's tragic death shortly after he recorded it last year, a few days before we were to have this session, and I would like to dedicate this session to his memory.
Challah, 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 it's the bread that Jews devour every Friday night. Sugar, yeast, oil, eggs, and flour, kneaded bread, wait half an hour, bake till it's done right. Every Shabbos, make a Torah portion, chew upon the story with devotion. 10 Commandments, Noah's Ark or Moses, there's a challah for them all. Joseph's coat of many sprinkled colors, Jacob's ladder, Israelites 10 plagues, and Pharaoh. Don't boil a kid in its mother's milk, and love your neighbor as yourself. In diseases, goats, and sheep, Miriam's own tambourine is made of the same dough. You can be a Jewish Bible scholar if you make a weekly Torah portion challah. All you need some eggs and yeast and flour. Just ask your friend Rabbi Rocket
Hello,
Power.
my name's Mark, and I'm here to show you one of my favourite recipes. This is for Rosh Hashanah, and I like to make an apple and honey challah for Rosh Hashanah. I've just mixed it up with the fork. I've let it do its stuff for the last 10 minutes, and as you can see, it's all nice and foamy and ready to go. Essentially what I'm doing is I'm creating a wet mix, and then I'll whip the dry mix, which is the flour. So there's my egg yolks. There's the rest of my water, 300 mils of water. We now want 250 grams of honey, 2 tablespoons of vegetable oil, I'm just using olive oil, and 2 teaspoons of vanilla. 1, 2. I'm just going to use a trusty fork so that it all comes together. Now, depending on what ingredients you've used, depending on the size of the eggs you've used, and the type of flour you're using will depend on how much flour you actually need. I'm going to put in about 2/3 to start with, and then see how we go from there. Right, so I've got about 2/3 of my flour in now, and I'm going to use a bread scraper. And I'm just mixing everything together right now. Keep mixing for the moment. So I'm going to put in most of the flour, leave a little bit left just in case. It's almost time for me to start kneading. I think it's still a little bit wet, so I'm going to add the last of my flour. Just got some plain flour here, which I'm going to use to just very, very lightly dust my bench top. I'm going to do some kneading now. So all you're doing is you're pulling it back with your one hand, with your fingers, and then with the palm of your hand, you're pushing out, and then bringing it back. Knead it. It's no longer sticking to my fingers, and this is a sticky dough recipe. It brings about hopefully a very nice moist challah. That is ready. I'm just going to scrape it into a bit of a ball shape, and then take my trusty olive oil, drizzle a little bit in my bowl, coat the bowl nicely, drop it in the bowl, flip it over so everything gets nicely coated, and then fill my saucepan with boiling water, and I put that at the bottom of my oven. Get a clean tea towel, dampen it under the tap, put it over my bowl, put that in the oven. The steam from the saucepan will give it a nice environment to rise. You now leave that for an hour. My dough has been proving for about an hour. I've taken 3 Granny Smith apples, and I've peeled them and I've cored them. This is the 3rd one. What I'm doing is I'm chopping it up into fine little cubes, putting them into a bowl with just some cold water and a teaspoon of salt. I'm now going to go into my oven where I'm going to get my dough out. Firstly, I'm just going to use my fingers and just punch it down like that. And then I'm just going to give it a fold. So I'm going to take top, fold it down. So I've done that now on all 4 sides. Now what I will do is I'll just flip that over. And just using my hands, I'm just going to tuck in, so it's still nice and round, my damp tea towel. Stick it back in the oven for another hour. My dough has been proving again in the oven for over an hour. Look at it now, it's looking lovely. I've also taken my apples. I've drained them, I've patted them dry with some paper towel. I've added 50 grams of caster sugar and a tablespoon of cinnamon. So there's my dough on my workspace. I'm going to cut it in half. It's the dough that you're not working on. I'm going to put back in your bowl your wet tea towel and stick it over the top. Now with this dough, you want to essentially get it into a nice shape that you can divide it into 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And all you want to do is essentially you want to flatten it out so that it's 3 or 4 inches wide, about 1 foot long. You can be fairly rough with it. I then take a half of 1 of the quarters of my apple and I'm going to lay that in the middle of my challah, like that. And then fold that over like that and then rolling it inside, I'm going to roll it into a log. It's just on the end, I'm going to taper it in with my hand like that. So both ends, I'm also just going to pinch the seam together and fold it over so that it doesn't open up when I'm cooking. The dough is sealed. Give it a good roll and then put that aside. So that's one done. And I've crisscrossed them over each other. And now I'm going to plait them while I'm showing you this. So you take from the left, you go over 1. Left, you go over 1. Left, you go over 1. And left, you go over 1. Then you go backwards. Right, go over 1. Make sure they're nice and tight. Right, you go over 1. Right, you go over 1. Right, you go over 1. And then you can do that again if you've got enough dough. And then just fold it in. Then I got my baking sheet. Very gently drop it on my baking sheet. There's one done. Now once that's done, you take your wet tea towel, cover your dough, and leave it until it's about doubled in size, which should be about 35 to 45 minutes. And these guys have proved up to a really nice size. What I have ready to go is I have some egg wash, which is 1 large egg, a pinch of salt, and a tablespoon of water, some demerara sugar, sesame seeds, some linseeds, and some poppy seeds. And this is how I'm going to decorate my challah. I have one here. Get my trusty pastry brush out. Right, so with the first one, I'm going to decorate with the sugar. So just with my hand, I'm just going to very lightly just sprinkle it over the top. Now putting on some sesame seeds, golden flax seeds, and some poppy seeds. And then I'll just sprinkle the whole thing with a bit of sugar. We have an oven which is set at around about 200 degrees Celsius. The other thing I've done is I've boiled a kettle again. And all I'm going to do is the baking tray, I've got the bottom of the oven. To add steam to the baking. What the steam does is allows the bread to rise before the crust forms. 20 minutes, and then I'll show you what the end product looks like when it's all finished. And they are looking amazing. We get a trivet out. So this is what colour number 1 looks like. Let's give it a quick baste. And I really want to make sure that I get all the little cracks and crevices covered with egg. And why don't we just give it a quick little sprinkle of sugar, just to Yes, I'm going to swap colour number 1 and colour number 2 around. Right, so lots of egg in these little crevices. That's where I'm putting the egg in. Right, so that gets another 20 minutes, and we'll see how they go. I'm going to have a check on them about 18 minutes along. So now we're at the end of the process where the challahs are ready to come out of the oven. Let's have a look at them. Oh, that looks lovely. And just check it sounds hollow underneath, which it does. Lovely. And that's 2 done as well. Thank you everyone for joining me for baking the apple and cinnamon and honey challah. Hope you have a wonderful Rosh Hashanah, Yom Tov, and good luck. Bye-bye.
We now come on to the soup course, and Robertson Rachel Lister will demonstrate her chicken soup recipe. It's a very straightforward recipe, very easy to make and delicious to eat. Let's listen to a 7-year-old wax lyrical about it.
Animal crackers in my soup, monkeys and rabbits loop the loop. Gosh, oh gee, but I have fun swallowing animals one by one. In every bowl of soup I see lions and tigers watching me. I make them jump right through a hoop, those animal crackers in my soup. When I get hold of the big bad wolf, I just push him under the ground. Then I bite him in a million bits, and I go boom him right down. When they're inside me where it's dark, I walk around like Noah's Ark. I stuff my tummy like a goop with animal crackers in my soup.
Hello, welcome to my fat-free, skim-free 1, 2, 3 chicken soup. This is a chicken soup that skips the stage of having to make the soup and then let it cool down, take off the fat, and then either put in the fridge or reuse. So this is what I do. I don't use carcasses, I don't use boilers. When I make chicken in the week, I pour off the fat from the chicken into a cup with a bag. And then the fat and the stock separate, and I put them in the freezer ready for use for when I want to make chicken soup. And here's 2 I've made earlier, where you see the fat's on top and the stock is underneath. I use a slow cooker, so it's an all-in-one, and this actually cooks on a Friday morning or on a Thursday while I work, and you don't need to be there with a slow cooker. So I'm going to start with the stock, and I'm going to put the stock in the pot. And the way I do it, because it's slightly frozen, I actually just slit the bag, and that will separate the fat from the stock. Or you can do it straight from the freezer and cut off the fat. So there's one. Here's another one. You can clearly see the fat is on the top, and I'm separating it now rather than at the end of the cooked soup. So there goes the stock, and the fat is still in the bag. Right, chicken soup can vary depending what you'd like to put in. So what I've done is I've cut up my vegetables. I use very simple vegetables that don't need too much checking for bugs and flies and creepy crawlies. So I'm going to put in carrots, and they've been peeled and chopped. They go in the pot. And then onions, I use about 6 onions because my children like them. The advantage of having the vegetables quite whole and quite sizable, those who don't want can have it clear, and those who would like the vegetables, you can offer what they'd like, or you can take them out altogether. So there's onions. I use celery, so these are chopped and checked, and I use a brush under the tap and chop and check those. So they go in. And then the tricky one, the leeks. What I do with the leeks is I slice them down the middle, and then you can open up the leaves and check the individual leaves for creepy crawlies. And these have all been washed and checked, and they get fan shaped, and that goes in the soup. So in that goes. Now we have our spices and our flavourings. This is about 2 tablespoons of chicken flavour soup and seasoning mix by Oza. That goes in. This is dried garlic powder. I usually use fresh garlic. Garlic powder. This is salt, about a teaspoon, and this is about 1/2 to 3/4 of a teaspoon of pepper. I tend to use the tops of the celery because they look very decorative in the soup, so that's going in. These are soup nuts for later. And I'm going to pour in the water. And then we're going to transport the slow cooker with its lid into the slow cooker, put it in, and forget about it for about 3 hours. Follow me. And that is going on a high setting, and that's going to cook for a few hours, and we'll see what that looks like in a few hours' time. Here we are again, several hours later. I'm going to check the chicken soup. This can either go on a high setting for about 6 hours, or I sometimes leave it on all day or through the night on a low setting. So I'm going to take the lid off and see what that looks like. Here we have our cooked chicken soup. Bear in mind that if it's Shabbat, this needs to be hot beforehand. I have a time switch, so my soup switches itself off on Shabbat. And if I'm actually serving it on Shabbat, then I'll take the inside out of the actual metal casing, because that's what I cooked it in, and you shouldn't really serve it on the heat. So this is our chicken soup. You can have it clear rather than vegetables, so this is for a clear one. Anybody who wants vegetables can request them. And there is our chicken soup. Let's add some croutons. And here we go. This is our Shabbat chicken soup, almost made by itself. Enjoy.
We now move to the main courses. There is a verse in Tehillim, Psalms, "He will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you will find refuge." Rabbi Lister will now show us how to cook date caramel chicken wings.
Hello everybody, this is my Asian date caramel chicken wing recipe, and it's a bit of a mouthful to say, and it's really easy to make, a lot of fun, and my family love it, so I'm happy to share it with you today. First thing I'm going to put in is 8 tablespoons of flour. That's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and there is other delights to go along with that. So I'm going to put in a tablespoon of pepper. It says sumac in the recipe, but you can use pepper as a near equivalent. A tablespoon of cumin, which is a fantastic spice. I really love it. And with all these lovely things together, we're going to make a mix that we can rub the chicken wings in. Here's some ginger. And it says put in other seasonings, so I'm going to stick in some shawarma mix. There we are. And some salt. And basically put in whatever you like. It's a very forgiving recipe, which is one of the reasons why I like it. You can chuck what you like at it, and it'll all be fine. When you've made your mix, the next thing you need to do is get your chicken wings, rub them in that mix, and lay them out on a tray. So that's the next thing we're going to do. Once you've got all the chicken wings laid out on the tray, you can drizzle some oil on them, stick them in the oven for about half an hour, turning them over halfway long, put them in for a bit longer if you need, about 150 degrees, half an hour or so should do the trick. So I've tossed all the chicken wings in the mix, and now I'm just drizzling the oil on them, liberally about, so it'll get a nice crispy touch when I put it in the oven. So the next thing we do is get some ingredients for the glaze. I've got 600 grams of sugar here, to which I'm adding 600 millilitres of vinegar. Any vinegar will do, any sugar will do. And the next thing you're supposed to do in principle is chop some dates into it, but dates are quite difficult to check. So I've cheated, I've got this date spread here. It's from a kosher shop. It's got a hesher on it, so I'm assuming that whatever needs checking has been checked. And I just get this tub of lovely thick dates fresh from the Holy Land, and I whack it in, and then you just mix it all up together, and that makes a lovely glaze. And we're going to use that to give a bit of extra taste to the chicken wings once they're out of the oven. So we put the mix in a pan, add 400 millilitres of water, and then you need to bring it to the boil slowly and stir it from time to time if you think it's going to stick. And that's going to be the end of the making of the glaze for the chicken wings. So just turn that on and off it goes. Here are the chicken wings halfway through the process. They've been in the oven for about 20 minutes. So I'm going to turn them over now so they can get done nicely on both sides. Here's the glaze coming to the boil now. It looks really lovely, and I'm going to let it cool off soon. So we've had the chicken wings baking in the oven for about 35 minutes now, and you can see that that floury mix we put on has sort of baked onto it. What we do now is we put each wing in the glaze that we heated up in the pan. Then simply put it back on the tray, and with that glaze on, we can put it back in the oven for another 5 minutes, then turn them over and 5 minutes again. And that will bake the glaze onto the chicken wings. Makes a lovely, sticky, sweet, caramelly glaze covering. It's really, really nice. So I'll have a go at that. We'll see how it looks when it comes out. And here's the finished product just out the oven. And you can see there's this nice brown glaze over the chicken wings, and they're quite nice to eat as well.
Very nice.
Our second main course is from Howard Shooter, who will demonstrate how to make shakshuka, a dish which I believe had its origins in the North African countries of Algeria, Libya and Tunisia.
Shakshuka, 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 yes! Yummy.
Hello everybody, today we're going to cook one of my favourite breakfast dishes, very Israeli, everyone's got their own recipe. This is my one and it's called shakshuka. So we're going to start over here with a skillet with extra virgin olive oil. We're just going to introduce the cumin seeds now so they can roast off, so you get that lovely warm nuttiness that comes through the cumin. Use a generous garlic of olive oil, and here's about a teaspoon of cumin. And you can just start smelling it through the pan, really delicious. And now what we're going to do, before we add the other spices, we're going to add next the onion. But I like the onion to cook a little bit before we add the garlic. Just so we don't burn the garlic. Then hit down a little bit. So it's a sofrito, it should sweat rather than, you don't want too much colour. So we'll just keep that moving around. And while that's moving around, we're now going to add a little bit of ground coriander. I'm going to say another teaspoon, that's all it needs. And now we can start smelling that great Moroccan sort of Middle Eastern flavours that you associate with shakshuka. You can see it's looking rather nice. Now, we add the spices now because we want them to cook out, we don't want them to be too powdery. And we're going to just add a little bit of chilli, but only a tiny bit to taste, just some chilli flakes, very, very little. And now we're going to add the garlic. So now everything's slowed down a bit. And that'll take just a couple of minutes for that to sweat down. That's just one pepper in there. And now we're going to add the paprika. Now, this is more than a good pinch. I love paprika, and the huge shakshuka flavour is paprika. I'd say this is about 2 good tablespoons, well, probably a tablespoon and a half. And again, don't be afraid, it's looking a bit grungy. That's quite part of the fun of it. If it doesn't look this grungy, you're not going to get that flavour and the smokiness that I can now taste. You can see everything is just cooking beautifully. And we just need to cook the powdery part out of the paprika. There's a couple of cans of tomatoes in here. I'll just mix that in as we go. It's about 1.5 cans fine. So what we're going to do now is check the blood spots in the egg to make sure that it's kosher. And if I'm looking here, what you do is you put the egg into a glass and you look around it. And this egg looks absolutely fine, and we're going to repeat that process. Scrunch a lovely black pepper. And now what we're going to do is we're going to make 4 little wells. You can see the tomato sauce has reduced down, it's looking really unctuous. And here we are, there's 1 well, and I've got my eggs ready that we've checked for blood spots, and they have none. And now we're just going to put that in there. That's 1. Now, if you want to, and I quite like this, to be very Israeli about it, what you can do is you can swirl the egg white through the tomato. It helps set the tomato. It's a really lovely way of doing it. And there we have it, there's our shakshuka. Good enough to eat, but what it really needs is that final touch, is just a little bit of pitta, dip it in. Look at that, absolutely delicious.
Next, on to the cake and dessert, and Debbie Singer will tell us how to make honey cake. I think if you ask most people which food they associate with Rosh Hashanah, the first one that would come to mind would be honey cake.
Hi, so today we're going to be making honey cake, and I first tried this in a friend's sukkah, and even though this recipe is for Rosh Hashanah, honey cake is good all year round. So today I'm going to be making the honey cake with Bella and Sienna, and they're going to be helping me.
Hi.
The first thing that we need to do is preheat the oven, which has already been done. And then the first thing I need is the flour. So Bella, if you could pass me the flour. And what we're going to do is sieve that into a bowl. That's the one. So we've got the self-raising flour, and we're just going to sieve that into a bowl. I've got the sieve here, just leaning on top of the bowl. So I'm just going to put that there. And it's all pre-measured. It is 450 grams of self-raising flour. Okay, sorry, I'm just going to cut you out for a second.
Oh, this is heavy. Okay, let's pour it in.
So now we are just going to sieve it through over here. Okay, let's go. So it just takes a little while. We're just going to sieve that in there. Okay, that's great. Okay, now we need to get the other dry ingredients. So we need the sugar, which is caster sugar, 225 grams of that, which is pre-measured over there. Sienna, will you pass me the caster sugar, please? Okay, great. Okay, so this is 225 grams of caster sugar. And we're just going to pop that in with the other dry ingredients so far. Then now we need to add in orange rind, so it's the zest of one large orange. And then if you girls could go and pass me the spices. So we've got
this one, this
both.
one, and this.
Yeah. So over there we have got 1 teaspoon of mixed spice, which smells amazing. And we've got 1 teaspoon of cinnamon over there. It smells pretty good.
This one.
And then we also have got, over here, we have half a teaspoon of bicarb of soda. So that is all of our dried ingredients. And we just literally mix those together. So I'll show you what it looks like over here. It's just smells delicious and a bit gingerbready with all the spices. So the girls are just going to mix that together. So if you go over there and over there. Okay, and now, meanwhile, I'm going to get the wet ingredients together. So the first thing you need is...
Mummy, when should we stop?
just once it's all mixed together.
Okay.
Okay. So for the wet ingredients, you need 450 ml of golden syrup. You need 225 ml of corn oil, 3 medium eggs, and 225 ml of boiled water. So first of all, I'll just go and get the...
It's nearly done. Mummy, does this look good?
That's great.
I think it's
Okay,
done.
you can stop that.
Can we show it?
No, that's fine. Okay, so this is our delicious golden syrup. So that's good. And now, Bella, if you could go and get me the corn oil. And Sienna, if you could get me the orange.
This one. I think it's this one.
Thank you, Sienna. Right, so this is the juice of 1 orange. It's one large orange. And now this is the corn oil, 225 ml of corn oil. So we just put that all in together. We don't need to mix it or anything yet. And then now we are going to deal with the eggs. And we're just going to check in a glass for blood spots. So we're just going to crack the egg in. Going to check it's good.
Oh, I think it's good.
There we go, that's good. And now we can pour, that's 1 egg.
1 egg done. Can we mix it a bit?
And then,
Come on, Sienna. No, Mummy said we don't need any mixing.
this is the second medium egg.
Mummy,
We're
do we
doing
need to
3.
mix? Can we-
Now the second is 3 medium eggs.
Oh, I think it looks fine too.
This
Yeah,
one
that
looks
looks really good too.
Great.
Pour that bit in.
And now we're going to add our 3rd egg.
Mix it a bit. I don't need to.
Great, that looks good. So now we are going to add that in to that. Okay, and now we are going to just give that a mix together. So now the dry ingredients and the wet ingredients have been mixed together. It does make quite a lot of batter, so I tend to use 2 sort of cake tins. You can use square tins or round tins. I generally like to make 2 cakes because then they cook through better and they do rise a bit. And also then you can make 1 for you and 1 for a friend. Okay, so I'm just going to pour the mixture into the tins and I'll show you once we've done that. A messy process. So, but it looks really good. We've got two tins. And what I'm going to do as well, actually, is over one of them, I'm going to pour just some flaked almonds over the top, just for a little bit of crunch. And now we're just going to pop those in the oven for about 50 to 60 minutes. And you need to check towards the end just to make sure that they're not getting burnt. I'll be back when they're out of the oven, and hopefully the kitchen is filled with the smell of honey cake. So I've just popped them out of the oven. It took about 55 minutes. They look delicious. The one with almonds looks very pretty, and the plain one looks very nice as well. And so what I would normally do now is get some icing sugar, add a bit of yellow to half of the white icing sugar, and then you can pipe some pretty patterns on the top of the plain honey cake. And I wish you all a sweet new year and hope everyone's keeping well. Bye.
And so on to the meal's dessert. It could have been some form of ice cream dish, but to avoid getting embroiled in the political wars currently being fought over this product, we've opted instead for bread pudding and figs, and the demonstrator is Anne Schister.
Put a bit of treacle on my pudding, Mary Ann, Mary Ann, Mary Ann, Mary Ann. Cover it, smother it, don't you stop till you can't see the pudding or the treacle on the top. I like a pudding when a pudding is a good one, and I don't want cake or jam. So put a bit of treacle on, treacle on, treacle on, treacle on my pudding, Mary Ann.
I'm going to show you one of my favourite recipes, which I think you might like to make for Yom Tov, for Rosh Hashanah, for Sukkot. It's called challah butter pudding. The butter is in inverted commas. And what we do is we take an old challah. You've probably got lots of challah over Yom Tov. We always buy too much. Slice the challah, butter it one side or toner it one side, like this. And then we're going to put marmalade on the other side of the challah, of the piece of bread. Now I often use sugar-free marmalade. So you could use normal golden shred, or you could use this St. Dalfor thick cut orange marmalade. Now you have to make sure that you buy this from the kosher shops. The ones from Sainsbury's or other supermarkets are not kosher because they contain grape juice. So we obviously have to have a supervised grape juice. So that's really good. Sometimes you can make this recipe using tinned apricots or peaches instead of using an apricot jam, instead of using raisins. And again, you have to be very careful when you buy your tinned fruit, because the sugar-free tinned fruit has grape juice in it. So we obviously can't buy those either. So you've got to buy the ones with sugar syrup, unfortunately. So what you do is, having buttered one side or tonered one side, you then layer it up into your dish, which is approximately 8 by 12. I've used a foil dish, pretty easy to be easy. And then you scatter raisins or sultanas, whatever you prefer, between the bread. As so, I will show you. Right, there's that in there like that. You can stuff it a bit fuller if you wanted to. So then you take raisins. I'm being very good and using a spoon and not my fingers like I normally use. But there we are, I'm scattering it in to the slices of bread. As much as you like. If you like raisins, shove them in. Put lots and lots and lots in. You can buy challah with raisins, but I think this is a better way of doing it. Right, so you've got slices of challah, toner one side, marmalade the other side. Then you take 5 eggs. So beat the eggs. Add in 115 grams of sugar. Beat it in. Add in 600 millilitres of soya milk. And obviously if you're making this milky, you'll use butter and ordinary milk. Then you beat it all together. It's really quite easy. All together. I tend to make a bit of a mess when I'm starting the colour. It tends to go everywhere. But I tidied up before we took this film. And pour onto your bread. Push the bread down. Make sure it's well into the mixture, into the custard mixture. You might want to give it a minute or two before you put it in the oven, just so the bread absorbs some of the liquid. Sometimes when I've got visitors coming in the week, I will not put this in the oven until it's time for us to sit down for the meal, because then by the end of the meal this is done. If you make it for Shabbat, then you'll just have to cover it and leave it on a low light, obviously, to stay hot. Once it's done, push it right down, and that goes into the oven at 180 degrees. Now if you don't want it to get done too quickly, then put a piece of foil very loosely over it. Sprinkle with a little bit of brown sugar. So, and add some orange zest. Just sprinkle that over. Push it down again. And you cook it in the oven, 180, 350, for approximately 35 to 40 minutes. So we'll just take this to the oven. These are two I made just a bit earlier. I took the same mixture and I split it in half, so I've got two smaller puddings. Given at the moment we're entertaining much smaller crowds, not large tables of people, I thought I'd split it, and that worked out beautifully well. You can vary it. You can do sprinkled chocolate chips in between instead of raisins. You can use apricot jam instead of marmalade, and chop up some peach slices or apricots halves into it. You could actually, if you really fancy, chop up 2 or 3 Mars bars and put that in, which will make it very chocolatey and very sweet. Serve the whole lot on Rosh Hashanah with some baked figs, and the recipe is at the end of the document. You've got figs sliced. I went to buy figs this morning. Of course, they didn't have the lovely big ones. They only had small ones. And you sprinkle the figs with some honey, with some cinnamon, and with any liqueur you might fancy. The recipe suggested brandy. I use cherry brandy. Cook for about 20 minutes on 180, 350, and just check it 10 minutes in to see how they're doing, because if they're smaller figs they're going to get done more quickly. If they're bigger ones it'll take a bit longer. So there you have your Rosh Hashanah dessert. Please enjoy. Have a wonderful Yom Tov, and B'tei Avon.
I would like to thank all the demonstrators for preparing their dishes, and hope that you will make use of some or all of them this coming Yom Tov. You can find all the recipes on the Edgware United Synagogue website, the events homepage, www.edgwareu.com, and you should be able to download them from there. If you enjoyed this session, please remember to hit the like and the share buttons if you're watching on YouTube, and remember that you can find many of our past sessions on the dedicated Edgware US YouTube channel, and details of our current adult education program from now until Pesach, all of which will be live streamed, will be made available on the events page of our website, www.edgwareu.com. Our next session in preparation for the high holidays is in 2 days' time, on Tuesday the 31st of August at 8 p.m, when Cantor Robert Brody will be talking about his favourite Yamim Noraim recordings. I look forward to you joining us then. I wish you the Shana HaTova Tichatevu V'Techatemu. May you be inscribed and sealed in the book of life for a good year. Keep safe and well, and enjoy the upcoming festivals.